This is insane HOA madness. She brought a ruler and a grudge. I am standing in my side yard in Rochester, New York, watching a woman I have never met yank a survey string line so hard the wooden stake pops out of the ground and the whole thing collapses in the dirt. She is screaming that my fence is a fire hazard and I need to stop work immediately or she will fine me $500 today, right now, no hearing. I moved to Rochester 2 years ago for the barbershop gig, a steady chair in a shop near downtown, where half my clients are city employees and the other half are retirees who love to gossip about every HOA scandal in Monroe County. I thought I was buying into a quiet neighborhood with reasonable rules. The Pinecrest Village Ridge Association had a reputation for being picky, sure, but I figured if I followed the permit process and kept my lawn trimmed, I would be fine. I was wrong. The compliance chair carries a ruler and a stopwatch, and the records custodian, Julie Thompson, treats every request like a personal insult. I found that out the hard way when I submitted my fence application in January. She stalled me for 3 weeks, then charged me $40 for copies of bylaws I could have downloaded for free if the HOA website actually worked. By the time I got my city permit in early March, I was already on her radar as someone who asks too many questions. The violation notice showed up 2 days after I hired the contractor. It claimed my fence panel, which was lying flat on the grass, waiting to be installed, was a fire hazard and a trip hazard and possibly an abandoned structure. I called the HOA office and got voicemail. I emailed and got an auto reply. I showed up at the office during posted hours and found the door locked with a handwritten note that said the custodian was out conducting inspections. That was my first clue this was going to be bad. The thing is, I am recovering from a torn rotator cuff. I got hurt lifting a client's kid into the barber chair 3 months ago, and my range of motion is still limited. I cannot do the digging or the heavy lifting myself, which is why I hired a crew in the first place. The HOA knows this because I mentioned it in my permit application when I explained why I needed contractors. Julie has been exploiting it ever since, scheduling inspections at times I cannot be there, and then claiming I am non-responsive when I miss them. Today was supposed to be simple. The crew shows up at 8 in the morning, strings the line, marks the post holes, and starts digging. We have the city permit, the survey from last year, and the HOA approval letter that finally arrived 2 weeks ago after I threatened to file a complaint with the state. Everything is legal. Everything is documented. But at 8:15, Julie pulls into my driveway in her orange sedan, gets out with a clipboard and that portable thermal printer she carries everywhere, and starts taking photos of the fence panel on the grass like it is a crime scene. She does not introduce herself. She does not ask if I am the homeowner. She just walks up to the string line, stares at it for 10 seconds, and says, "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." I ask her what that means. She ignores me and starts measuring the distance from the string line to the property marker with a tape measure she pulls from her windbreaker pocket. The contractor, a guy named Dave, who has been doing fences in Rochester for 20 years, stops what he is doing and watches her with his arms crossed. He has seen this before. He tells me later that Julie has a reputation in the trades. She shows up at job sites, claims code violations that do not exist, and tries to get contractors to walk off so she can fine the homeowner for abandonment. Julie finishes measuring, writes something on her clipboard, and then rips a sheet from the thermal printer. She holds it out between us, and I can see it as a violation notice, freshly printed, with today's date and a bold header that says final warning in normal casing. I take it and read the first line. It says my fence work is an immediate safety hazard and must cease until the board reviews photographic evidence and determines compliance. The notice is dated today, but the photos attached are from last week when the panel was first delivered. I know because I can see the snow in the background, and we have not had snow in 10 days. I point this out. I say the dates do not match and ask her how she can issue a final warning for something that just started today. She smiles, not friendly, and says, "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." That line sticks with me. I do not argue. I fold the notice, put it in my jacket pocket, and tell Dave to keep working. Julie turns red and raises her voice. She says if the crew does not stop immediately, she will call the city and have the permit revoked. Dave looks at me, and I nod. He picks up the post hole digger and goes back to work. Julie spins around, walks to her car, and pulls out her phone. She makes a call, and I hear her say she has an emergency stop work situation and needs an enforcement officer immediately. She is lying. There is no emergency. The city permit is valid, the work is not blocking any easement, and the fence height is 2 inches under the maximum allowed by code. But she is counting on the city not showing up fast enough to verify, and by the time they do, she will have already intimidated me into stopping. I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. That was her first mistake. Julie does not leave. She parks her car at the curb, sits in the driver's seat with the window down, and watches the crew like a hawk. Every time Dave or his partner moves a tool, she takes a photo. Every time I step outside, she angles her phone at me. It is harassment, plain and simple, but it is also calculated. She is building a file, and she is going to use it to bury me at the next board meeting. The concrete for the posts is already mixed, and if we do not set them now, it is wasted. Dave mentions this twice. He says the batch only stays good for about 90 minutes once it is mixed, and if we have to dump it, I am out $200 plus the cost of remixing. I tell him to go ahead. Julie gets out of her car, walks up to the edge of my property, and starts yelling that I am violating a direct order from the HOA and she is documenting every second. Dave ignores her. His partner, a younger guy named Miguel, keeps glancing at her like he is expecting her to physically stop them. She does not, but she makes it clear she is going to escalate. At 9:30, a white pickup truck pulls up with a city logo on the side. A building inspector named Ray gets out, clipboard in hand, and asks what is going on. Julie intercepts him before he even reaches my driveway. She gives him a 5-minute lecture about how I am building a non-conforming fence without proper HOA approval and the neighborhood safety is at risk. Ray listens, nods politely, and then asks to see my permit. I hand it to him. He looks it over, checks the survey map, measures the setback himself with his own tape, and tells Julie the work is legal and the HOA has no authority to stop it. Julie argues. She pulls out her phone, shows him the photos, and insists the dates prove I have been working without approval. Ray zooms in on one of the photos, points at the snow in the background, and says this was taken over a week ago and has nothing to do with today. Julie sputters. She says the photo timeline is irrelevant because the violation is ongoing. Ray shakes his head and tells her if she interferes with permitted work again, he will file a complaint with the city attorney. Julie does not apologize. She just glares at me, gets back in her car, and drives off. I think that is the end of it. I am wrong. 2 hours later, I get an email. It is from Julie, sent to the entire HOA board and copied to every homeowner in Pinecrest Village Ridge Association. The subject line says urgent compliance failure, and the body is a 3-paragraph essay about how I am refusing community standards and putting the neighborhood at risk by ignoring safety protocols. She attaches the violation notice in the photos, but she does not mention Ray or the city permit. She frames it like I am some rogue operator who is building whatever I want and laughing at the rules. The email ends with a call to action. She says the board needs to hold an emergency hearing and assess fines immediately to prevent further damage. I forward the email to my attorney, a guy named Marcus, who I met through a client at the barbershop. He does HOA defense work on the side, and he has seen Julie in action before. He tells me this is a classic intimidation tactic. She blasts the email to create social pressure, hoping other homeowners will turn on me and demand I stop. He says the best response is to document everything, file a formal complaint with the board, and request a copy of the meeting minutes from the last 6 months to see if she has pulled this stunt before. I do exactly that. I send a records request to the HOA office asking for minutes, bylaws, and any correspondence related to my property. The request is polite, professional, and includes a deadline of 10 business days as required by state law. Julie responds 3 days later with an invoice for $150. She claims the records request is excessive and requires staff time to compile. I check the bylaws. The fee cap is $25 for standard requests, and she is not allowed to charge for digital files. I forward her invoice to Marcus, and he sends her a letter explaining that she is violating state law and the HOA bylaws. She does not respond. She also does not provide the records. While I am waiting, Dave finishes the post holes and sets the concrete. The fence is going up in stages because we are using a modular system that requires the posts to cure before we attach the panels. Julie shows up again the next morning, this time with a tape measure stretched tight along a string line she sets up herself on what she claims is the actual property line. Her line is 6 inches inside my survey line. I ask her where she got her survey. She says she does not need one because she has been custodian for 8 years and she knows where every property line in the neighborhood is located. I tell her that is not how surveys work. She says I am being difficult and she is adding another violation for encroachment. I call Ray again. He comes back out, checks the survey markers, and confirms my line is correct. He tells Julie to remove her string line because it is on my property and she is trespassing. She refuses. She says the survey markers were moved and she has proof. Ray asks to see the proof. She pulls out a printed photo from 2 years ago showing a survey stake in a slightly different position. Ray zooms in, points at the date stamp, and says the photo predates my ownership and the current survey. Julie does not care. She leaves her string line in place and walks off. That night, someone moves one of my survey stakes. I do not notice until the next morning when Dave points it out. The stake has been pulled out of the ground and relocated about 8 inches to the west, which would put my fence inside Julie's imaginary encroachment zone. I check my doorbell camera footage from overnight. At 2 in the morning, a figure in a windbreaker and a sun hat walks up to the stake, pulls it out, and moves it. The figure is backlit by a street lamp, but the outfit is unmistakable. It is Julie. I save the footage, send a copy to Marcus, and keep working. The email blast from Julie has consequences. Neighbors start avoiding me. One guy across the street, a retired teacher named Bill, stops by and says he heard I was building an illegal fence and he is worried about property values. I show him the permit, the survey, and Ray's notes. He nods, says he believes me, but admits he is scared to cross Julie because she has a history of targeting people who disagree with her. He tells me about a couple 3 doors down who tried to paint their shutters a non-approved color. Julie cited them, fined them, and then sent letters to their mortgage lender claiming they were in violation of the HOA covenants. The lender threatened foreclosure until they repainted the shutters. Bill says the couple moved out 6 months later. He does not want that to happen to him, so he is staying neutral. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit like and subscribe so you do not miss the next time an HOA records custodian tries to rewrite the rules and gets caught on camera. I file my formal complaint with the board on a Tuesday. I attach the doorbell footage, Ray's inspection notes, the state law citation about records fees, and a timeline showing every time Julie has lied or fabricated evidence. I request an in-person hearing and demand that Julie be recused from any decisions involving my property. The board schedules the hearing for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening. The location is the Pinecrest Village Ridge Association Community Center, a bland 1-story building with a meeting room that smells like old coffee and laminated wood. I show up at 6:45 with Marcus. Julie is already there, sitting at the head of the table with her clipboard, thermal printer, and a stack of papers. The board president, a man named Greg who works in real estate, sits to her right. 2 other board members, both middle-aged men who look like they would rather be anywhere else, sit on the opposite side. There are about a dozen homeowners in the audience, most of them looking bored or annoyed. Bill is there, sitting in the back. He gives me a small nod. Julie does not look at me. She is busy arranging her papers and whispering to Greg. Greg calls the meeting to order at 7 sharp. He says the board has reviewed my complaint and Julie's response, and they are here to determine the facts and issue a ruling. He asks Julie to present her case first. She stands up, pulls out a 3-page printed document, and starts reading. She claims I submitted an incomplete permit application, began construction without HOA approval, ignored multiple violation notices, harassed city inspectors, and tampered with survey markers. Every sentence is a lie or a distortion. She shows the photos from last week, the ones with the snow, and claims they were taken yesterday. She shows her string line photo and says my survey is fraudulent. She ends by saying I am a threat to neighborhood safety and the board needs to issue an immediate stop work order and assess fines totaling $2,000. Marcus stands up before I can say anything. He asks Julie if she has copies of the meeting minutes from the last 6 months. She says she does. He asks her to provide them. She hesitates, then hands him a folder. Marcus flips through it, pauses on one page, and holds it up. He says this is the March meeting minutes, and according to the notes, the board approved my fence application on March 8th. Julie interrupts and says that approval was conditional and I did not meet the conditions. Marcus asks her to specify the conditions. She says I needed to provide proof of contractor insurance and a revised site plan. Marcus pulls out a folder and hands Greg 2 documents. One is the insurance certificate from Dave, dated March 10th. The other is the revised site plan, submitted March 12th. Both documents are stamped received by the HOA office. Julie goes pale. Greg asks Julie if she received these documents. She says yes, but they were insufficient. Marcus asks her to explain how. She says the insurance certificate did not include a rider for property damage. Marcus points to the second page of the certificate, which lists property damage coverage up to $1 million. Julie does not respond. Greg looks at her and asks if there is anything else. She says the whole process is irrelevant because I violated the stop work order she issued. Marcus asks to see the stop work order. Julie pulls out the thermal printed notice from 2 weeks ago. Marcus reads it out loud, pauses, and says this notice is dated March 21st, but my permit was issued March 15th and work began March 18th. He asks Julie how she can issue a stop work order for work that was already legally permitted. She says the permit was invalid because I did not follow HOA procedures. Marcus pulls out the email chain showing I followed every procedure, submitted every document, and paid every fee. Julie is silent. I stand up and ask Greg if I can present additional evidence. He nods. I pull out my phone, connect it to the projector in the meeting room, and play the doorbell footage from 2 nights ago. The room goes silent. Everyone watches as the figure in the red windbreaker and white sun hat walks up to my survey stake, pulls it out, and moves it. I pause the video and zoom in on the figure. The outfit is unmistakable. Bill, sitting in the back, says out loud, "That is Julie." Greg stares at the screen. Julie stands up and says the video is fake and I am trying to frame her. Marcus asks her if she was on my property at 2 in the morning on March 23rd. She says no. Marcus says the metadata from the video shows the date and time, and if she wants to dispute it, we can bring in a forensic expert. Julie sits down. Greg calls for a 5-minute recess. The board members huddle in the corner, whispering. Julie does not move. She sits at the table, staring at her papers, her face red. Marcus leans over and tells me this is going better than he expected. He says the video is the trump card, and Julie did not see it coming. I did not mention the footage in my complaint because I wanted her to commit to her version of events first. Now she is trapped. If she admits she was on my property, she admits to trespassing and tampering. If she denies it, she is calling the video fake, which opens her up to perjury if this ever goes to court. Greg calls the meeting back to order. He says the board has reviewed the evidence and determined that my fence work is legal, properly permitted, and in compliance with all HOA and city regulations. He says the violation notices issued by Julie are invalid and will be rescinded. He does not mention the video. He does not mention the tampering. He just says the board will be conducting an internal review of the record's custodian role and making changes to ensure transparency and accountability. It is a vague non-apology, but it is enough. The stop work order is gone. The fines are gone. I can finish my fence. Julie stands up and says this is a miscarriage of justice, and the board is enabling a resident who has no respect for rules. Greg cuts her off and says the meeting is adjourned. Julie storms out, slamming the door behind her. Bill walks up to me after the meeting and says he is glad I fought back. He says half the neighborhood has been waiting for someone to stand up to Julie, but no one wanted to be the first. He shakes my hand and leaves. I think that is the end of it. I am wrong again. The next morning I get a call from Dave. He says someone left a note on his truck overnight. The note, printed on thermal paper, says he is banned from working in Pinecrest Village Ridge Association, and if he returns, the HOA will file a complaint with the city licensing board. Dave is furious. He says he has never been banned from a neighborhood before, and this is going to hurt his reputation. I tell him to ignore it. I said the note is not legally binding and Julie has no authority to ban contractors. He says he believes me, but he is worried Julie will follow through and file a false complaint. I call Marcus again. He says if Julie files a false complaint, we can sue her for defamation and tortious interference. He drafts a letter and sends it to Julie and the board, warning them that any further harassment of my contractor will result in legal action. Julie does not respond, but the harassment does not stop. Over the next 3 days, I find a tow yard receipt with dirt smudges in my mailbox. It has no name, no vehicle description, just a date and a fee amount. I have no idea what it means until Bill stops by and tells me Julie has been leaving fake tow notices in mailboxes around the neighborhood, trying to scare people into thinking their cars are going to be towed for street parking violations. Bill says he got one last month and panicked until he called the towing company, and they said they had no record of his vehicle. He says it is one of Julie's tactics. She creates fake documents to intimidate people, counting on them not to verify. I add the receipt to my evidence folder. The fence is almost done. Dave and Miguel install the last 2 panels on a windy day that whips loose papers and rattles fence panels. Julie shows up again, this time with a different clipboard and a camera. She does not say anything. She just walks along the fence line, taking photos and making notes. I ignore her. Dave finishes the last panel, cleans up the tools, and tells me the job is complete. I pay him, shake his hand, and thank him for putting up with the chaos. He says he has been doing this for 20 years, and Julie is the worst HOA representative he has ever dealt with. He says he is going to start charging extra for jobs in Pinecrest Village Ridge Association. The following week, I get a letter in the mail. It is from the HOA attorney, a woman named Linda who works for a firm in downtown Rochester. The letter says the board has completed its internal review and determined that Julie violated multiple HOA bylaws and state regulations. It says Julie is being removed from the records custodian role, effective immediately, and the board is implementing new policies to prevent similar abuses in the future. The letter also says the board is rescinding all fines and violation notices issued to me, and I will receive a written apology from Greg. It is a complete reversal, and it is clearly driven by the attorney who realized Julie created a massive liability for the HOA. I do not get the apology letter for another 2 weeks, but when it arrives, it is short and bland. Greg writes that the board regrets any inconvenience and appreciates my patience. He does not mention Julie by name. He does not mention the video or the tampering. It is a carefully worded CYA letter designed to limit the HOA's exposure. I do not care. The fence is done, the fines are gone, and Julie is out. But Julie is not done with me. 3 days after I get the apology letter, I am at the grocery store near my house, loading bags into my car, when I hear a voice behind me. I turn around and see Julie standing 10 feet away, holding her clipboard and portable thermal printer. She is not wearing the windbreaker today. She has on a gray sweater and jeans, but the sun hat is still there. She walks up to me and says we need to talk. I close my trunk and cross my arms. I ask her what she wants. She says the board made a mistake and she is going to appeal the decision. She says she has documentation that proves I violated the rules, and she is going to present it at the next board meeting. I tell her the attorney already reviewed everything and sided with me. She says the attorney does not understand the neighborhood culture, and the board is going to regret listening to outsiders. A passerby holding up a phone with the screen turned away walks past us, glancing over with curiosity. Julie does not notice. She keeps talking, raising her voice. She says I am setting a precedent that will destroy Pinecrest Village Ridge Association and turn it into a lawless free-for-all where people can build whatever they want. I ask her if she is threatening me. She says she does not threaten people, she enforces rules. I pull out my phone and start recording. Julie sees the camera and freezes. She says I am harassing her and she is going to call the police. I say go ahead. She does not. She turns around and walks to her car. I save the video and send it to Marcus. Marcus calls me that night and says the grocery store confrontation is harassment, and if Julie contacts me again, we can file for a restraining order. He says the attorney letter should have been the end of it, but Julie is clearly not letting go. He advises me to avoid any further contact and let him handle any communication. I agree. 2 weeks later, the board holds its regular monthly meeting. I do not plan to attend, but Bill calls me the day before and says I should come because Julie is on the agenda. He says she submitted a petition signed by 12 homeowners demanding the board reinstate her as custodian and reverse the decision on my fence. I ask Bill if the petition is real. He says he does not know, but he saw it posted in the community center. I decide to go. The meeting is packed. There are at least 30 homeowners in the room, double the usual attendance. Julie is sitting in the front row, clipboard in hand, looking smug. Greg starts the meeting and says the board has received a petition requesting Julie's reinstatement. He reads the names on the petition out loud. Bill, sitting next to me, leans over and whispers that half the names are people who moved out of the neighborhood years ago. Marcus, sitting on my other side, takes notes. Greg finishes reading and asks if anyone wants to speak in favor of the petition. Julie stands up. She gives a 10-minute speech about her 8 years of service, her commitment to the neighborhood, and the injustice of her removal. She does not mention the video. She does not mention the tampering. She frames herself as a victim of a personal vendetta led by me. She ends by saying the board needs to put neighborhood safety above individual complaints and restore her authority. Greg asks if anyone wants to speak against the petition. Bill stands up. He says he has lived in Pinecrest Village Ridge Association for 12 years, and he has seen Julie target multiple homeowners with fabricated violations and excessive fees. He says her removal was justified and the board should not reverse it. 2 other homeowners stand up and echo Bill's points. One of them, a woman named Susan who lives 2 streets over, says Julie fined her $300 for a garden gnome that was supposedly too tall and violated aesthetic standards. Susan says she measured the gnome herself and it was under the height limit, but Julie refused to listen. She says she ended up paying the fine because she could not afford an attorney. Marcus stands up and says he represents multiple homeowners who have been targeted by Julie, and if the board reinstates her, he will file a class action lawsuit for abuse of authority and selective enforcement. Greg looks uncomfortable. He says the board appreciates everyone's input and will take the petition under advisement. Julie interrupts and says the board needs to vote tonight. Greg says the board does not vote on personnel matters in public session. Julie argues. Greg bangs the gavel and says the meeting is adjourned. Julie stands up, glares at me, and walks out. The next day, I get an email from Linda, the HOA attorney. She says the board met in executive session after the public meeting and voted unanimously to deny Julie's petition. She says the board is also implementing a formal complaint process with third-party oversight to prevent future abuses. She says the city has been notified of the situation and has agreed to monitor the HOA's compliance with state regulations. It is a complete victory. Julie is out, the policies are changing, and the city is watching. But I am not done. I want to close the loop on the minutes. Marcus requested copies of the meeting minutes from the last 6 months as part of discovery, and when they arrived, he noticed something strange. The March meeting minutes, the ones Julie handed him at the hearing, did not match the version posted on the HOA website. The website version said my fence application was tabled pending further review. The version Julie handed him said the application was approved. Marcus contacted the board secretary, a quiet woman named Diane who has been on the board for 2 years. Diane confirmed that the minutes were edited after the meeting and the original file was on her laptop. She provided Marcus with a copy of the original file, complete with metadata showing the edit date and the editor's username. The username was Julie's. Marcus sent the evidence to Linda with a formal complaint. Linda forwarded it to the board and advised them to terminate Julie's access to all HOA records and systems immediately. The board complied. They also sent a letter to every homeowner explaining that the minutes had been tampered with and corrected versions were being posted. The letter did not name Julie, but everyone knew who was responsible. I thought the grocery store confrontation was the end, but the real showdown happens 2 weeks later. I am at the shop cutting hair when Bill texts me and says Julie just showed up at the community center with a stack of papers and is demanding to address the board. The board is not in session, but Greg is there doing paperwork. Bill says Julie is refusing to leave until Greg meets with her. I finish the haircut, tell my next client I will be back in 20 minutes, and drive to the community center. When I get there, Julie is standing in the lobby, clipboard in hand, yelling at Greg. She is saying the board violated her due process and she is filing a lawsuit for wrongful termination. Greg is saying she was not an employee and there is no termination to sue over. Julie says she is going to expose the board's corruption and incompetence to the media. Greg says she is welcome to do that, but she needs to leave the building. Julie refuses. She says she has a right to be there as a homeowner. Greg says she is trespassing, and if she does not leave, he will call the police. Julie says, go ahead. Greg pulls out his phone and dials. Julie sees him and suddenly realizes this is not a bluff. She grabs her clipboard and thermal printer and heads for the door. I am standing near the entrance, and she has to walk past me to get out. She stops, looks me in the eye, and says, I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. It is the exact same line she used the first day she showed up at my house. I smile and say, you already tried that, and it did not work out for you. She does not respond. She just walks out and gets in her car. Greg thanks me for coming, but says there was no need. He says the board has consulted with Linda and determined that Julie's behavior constitutes harassment under HOA bylaws and state law. He says if she contacts any board member or attempts to access HOA property again, they will file for a restraining order. I ask Greg if the board is going to do anything about the fake tow receipts or the fabricated violation notices. He says Linda is reviewing all of Julie's actions as custodian and will recommend appropriate consequences. He does not specify what those consequences might be, but I get the sense the board is trying to avoid a lawsuit by handling it quietly. A week later, the city sends a letter to the board. Marcus gets a copy and forwards it to me. The letter says the city has reviewed the complaint regarding HOA interference with permitted construction and has determined that the Pinecrest Village Ridge Association violated city code by issuing stop work orders without authority. The letter warns the board that future interference will result in fines and potential suspension of the HOA's ability to enforce covenants. It is a brutal letter, and it makes it clear the city is not going to tolerate any more games. Linda responds with her own letter to the board. She says the city's warning creates significant liability for the HOA and recommends the board adopt a new policy prohibiting any stop work orders unless approved by a licensed attorney in the city. She also recommends the board conduct a full audit of all violation notices issued in the last 2 years to identify any other cases where procedures were not followed. The board votes to adopt both recommendations. It is a complete overhaul, and it is all because Julie overreached and got caught. I finish my fence the first week of April. It is a clean white vinyl fence, 6 feet tall, set exactly on the survey line with proper setback from the sidewalk and the utility easement. Dave does a final walkthrough, checks every post and panel, and says it is one of the best jobs he has done all year. I thank him again and pay the balance. He says he is glad it worked out and he is sorry I had to deal with Julie. I tell him it was worth it. The fence looks good. The neighbors start complimenting it. Susan, the woman with the garden gnome, stops by and says she is thinking about replacing her fence and asks for Dave's number. Bill walks over one evening and says the neighborhood feels different now that Julie is not patrolling every day with her clipboard. He says people are starting to relax and enjoy their homes again. I tell him I hope it lasts. 2 months later, the board holds its annual election. Julie does not run. Greg steps down as president and endorses a younger homeowner named Amir, who runs on a platform of transparency and fairness. Amir wins by a landslide. One of his first acts is to appoint a new records custodian, a retired paralegal named Karen who has no relation to Julie and no history in the neighborhood. Karen immediately publishes a new records request policy that caps fees at the state minimum and guarantees responses within 5 business days. She also digitizes the entire archive and posts it on the HOA website. It is a transformation. I run into Julie one more time, 3 months after the fence is finished. I am at the grocery store again, loading bags into my car, when I see her walking toward the entrance. She is not wearing the sun hat. She looks tired. She sees me, hesitates, and then changes direction, walking around the far side of the parking lot to avoid me. I do not say anything. I just load my groceries and drive home. The lawsuit never happens. Linda later tells Marcus that Julie consulted with 2 attorneys, and both advised her she had no case. The doorbell video, the edited minutes, the fabricated notices, and the fake tow receipts were all documented and would be admitted as evidence if she sued. Linda says Julie dropped the idea and stopped attending board meetings. Marcus says she is probably hoping everyone forgets and she can fade into the background. I do not think that is going to happen. Too many people remember what she did. The final piece of the story happens 6 months later. I am at the shop cutting hair when a guy I do not recognize sits down in my chair. He introduces himself as Eric and says he just moved into Pinecrest Village Ridge Association. He asks me what the HOA is like. I tell him it used to be a nightmare, but it has gotten a lot better. He asks what changed. I give him the short version, a records custodian who abused her authority, fabricated violations, tampered with documents, and got caught on camera. Eric listens, nods, and says he heard rumors about a prior board member who was forced out, but no one would give him details. I tell him the details are public record now, and if he wants the full story, he can request the meeting minutes from the last year. He says he will do that. As I am finishing his haircut, Eric mentions that his next-door neighbor is a woman named Julie, who keeps to herself and does not attend HOA meetings anymore. I pause mid-clip and ask him to describe her. He says brown, shoulder-length, wavy hair, middle-aged, drives an orange sedan. I finish the haircut and Eric leaves. I text Bill and tell him Julie is still in the neighborhood. Bill texts back and says he knows, but she has been completely silent since the election. He says it is eerie how quiet she is now, like she is waiting for something. I do not know what she is waiting for, but I am not going to let my guard down. The HOA holds its first town hall under the new board in late September. Amir announces that the compliance process is being overhauled with a 3-step warning system, mandatory mediation, and an appeals process that includes a neutral third-party arbitrator. He says the goal is to make enforcement fair and predictable so homeowners are not surprised by sudden fines or stop work orders. The crowd applauds. Susan stands up and thanks the board for listening. Bill stands up and says this is the first time in years he feels like the HOA is working for the homeowners instead of against them. Amir says the credit goes to everyone who spoke up and demanded change. He does not mention me by name, but Bill glances over and gives me a thumbs up. I leave the meeting feeling like the nightmare is finally over. The fence is done, the policies are fixed, and the neighborhood is moving forward. But as I walk to my car, I see Julie's orange sedan parked in the far corner of the lot. She is sitting in the driver's seat watching the community center entrance. She does not start the engine. She does not get out. She just sits there watching. I get in my car and drive home, glancing in the rearview mirror. The orange sedan does not follow. Marcus calls me the next day and says Linda reached out with an update. The HOA attorney has completed the audit of violation notices from the past 2 years. Out of 120 notices issued during Julie's tenure, 47 were found to be improper or unsupported by the bylaws. Linda recommended the board void all 47 notices and refund any fines collected. The board voted to approve the recommendation. Marcus says the refunds total over $12,000, and the board is paying out of the HOA general fund. He says this is going to put a dent in the budget, but it is necessary to avoid litigation. He also says 3 homeowners who were fined by Julie are considering filing individual lawsuits for emotional distress and abusive process. Linda is negotiating settlements to keep the cases out of court. I ask Marcus if I should join the lawsuits. He says I could, but my case is weaker because I did not pay any fines and the board reversed everything. He says the doorbell video and the edited minutes are strong evidence of misconduct, but proving damages will be harder. I decide not to sue. I already won. The fence is up, the policies are fixed, and Julie is out. That is enough. The final karma moment comes in November. The board publishes its annual financial report, and buried in the footnotes is a line item for legal fees related to custodian misconduct. The amount is $23,000. That number includes Linda's fees for the audit, the city's investigation, and the settlements with the 3 homeowners who threatened to sue. The report does not name Julie, but everyone knows where the money went. Bill texts me a screenshot of the report with a note: "She cost the HOA more in 1 year than she saved in a decade." I laugh and forward it to Marcus. He replies, "Karma is a line item in the budget." The neighborhood settles into a new normal. The compliance process works smoothly. The new records custodian responds to requests within hours. The board meetings are shorter and less combative. People start attending again because they trust the process. I hear through the grapevine that Julie tried to run for the board in a neighboring HOA and was rejected after a background check revealed her history in Pinecrest Village Ridge Association. I do not know if that is true, but I hope it is. I finish a haircut one December afternoon and look out the shop window. The snow is starting to fall, light and slow, covering the streets and the rooftops. I think about the fence, the string line, the survey stakes, and the doorbell video. I think about Julie standing in my yard, holding her clipboard, saying she was going to make an example out of me. She did, but not the way she intended. She became the example of what happens when someone abuses authority and underestimates the people they are trying to control. The city warned the HOA to stop interfering with permitted work. The HOA attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability, and Karen's timeline was proven false with timestamps. A statute citation read into the minutes shut the threat down, and the neighbor fact-checked her instantly when it mattered most. The fence is still standing, white and clean, exactly where it should be, and I am still here, cutting hair, listening to neighborhood gossip, and grateful I fought back. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.